guys, it's Matt from DrawingTutorialsOnline.com with my counterpart in crime, Truffles. Truffles, say hello. You see everybody out there in YouTube land? Well, listen, I have a clip that I want to share with you. I'm in the midst of creating an entire illustration course at DrawingTutorialsOnline.com. It's all about my illustration process from start to finish. And in this particular short clip, I want to share with you my thought process when creating rough sketches. This rough sketch stage is not about drawing some realistic type drawing. It's just a sketch stage prior to having a photo shoot, and then after the photo shoot with the model, then we do a tight sketch. So check this out. Hopefully it will open up your eyes to some things to think about as you're working on your rough sketches. And say goodbye, Truffs. Who's that? Who's there? All right, I'll talk to you soon. Be good. Perfect. Okay. I have my reference. Now, our first rough sketch, okay? When I first started drawing this rough sketch, I started with the anchor of drawing these two buildings in. And I have these two buildings right over here. I just sketched them in. I played with using this kind of slope of the land. I just did some of this out of my imagination. I looked at some of these little railings down over here of fence. A lot of cool things within this little area. I use that. I drew this first, and that technically is going to be my horizon line. Now, I also looked at this piece of reference, and I see my horizon line is right there, and I'm going to use this big field as a backdrop for my figure. Step number one, start to draw from your reference. Get a structure or two in, get a couple items in, then set your horizon line. Immediately start to think about compositional shapes. For me, this is pretty much my compositional shape. It's this area over here where all of my stuff is going to be. Remember, compositional shapes are shapes of shadow and light, or shapes of a lot of stuff, like a lot of people. That's my compositional shape. She is going to be overlapping that compositional shape. As you can see, I didn't copy from this photo exactly, and I did not copy from this photo exactly. I combined the two of them. That's where you're going to use your artistic license. Now, when you look at this piece photo reference, the grass here is primarily light. Another big thing that I'm thinking about as I work on this rough sketch is I'm thinking about a value study for myself. Now, the buildings are going to be fairly dark. The grass over here is going to be a middle tone in the midground. In the foreground where she is standing, I'm going to have a gradation, but this field is going to be fairly light. Now, when I first started this sketch, I drew it, and then I got up and I got a glass of water, and I came back and I looked at it, and her dress was way too light. As you work on your thumbnail sketches, they're really meant for a value study. Now listen, here we go. There's going to be a problem with this video right now because the UPS truck is here, and I've got two French bulldogs, and I do not want to start this video over again. So you're going to laugh at me right now, and my French bulldog right behind me is going to bark, and my other one downstairs is going to bark. I digress. Okay, we've talked about a lot of stuff here. We talked about first drawing in our anchors, putting in our horizon line, thinking about our compositional shape, placing our figure within the scene, in terms of values and what's the value of the fabric going to be, what is behind her. I need to think about that stuff now when I have my photo shoot. A couple of other things that we also want to think about is placement of our character. Now, in our thumbnails, if you remember, I talked about that you can use the grid and you can use the center line. All of that is great. I also spoke to the golden section where you can use a mathematical equation, and well, I guess the dogs didn't bark. You can use a mathematical equation and you can place your figure that way. I'm basically doing it by eye because I've done the golden section so many times that I kind of have a feel for it. Basically, where that is at her neck, right over here. I do believe it should be right there. And also, she's in with it. What did I mention in the thumbnail sketch stage? That these central four boxes should have some of the most important aspects of your scene. So she is in two of those boxes, and my structures are in those boxes as well. That's how I'm going about placing the figure. Plus, I want a very comfortable open scene because she's in a big open out west type field, and there's plenty of space between her hair and the border, the edge of her and the border. I want that open space. That's very important to me. Let me just look over my notes. Yeah, that's going to be my anchor. Combining these pieces of reference, I'm looking for the light clues in the references. I'm trying to keep everything in sync. So the shadow should be on the right side of her, and she should be casting a shadow to the right. Now, other things that I'm thinking about, I really, really like this irrigation channel because it's going to give me the opportunity to have some cool of the sky in my foreground in that little water. I like the light and the shadow. I didn't copy it exactly. I might have it here and have an S-curve and have it kind of flow like that. I could also make it where she overlaps that. I'll play with that on my final sketch a little bit more. I've got my three values. I pretty much have my dark. I have my dark on her. I have a middle tone. I have a middle tone on her front plane. I'm thinking about the value ratios of her dress. Now, let's talk about what she's doing. She's not doing much of anything in this particular scene. It's a very quiet scene. She's looking off into the distance, perhaps waiting for her family to come home. And I just have her hands clutching her dress. Perhaps she's holding her dress. And there's many things that I'm going to work out when I have the photo shoot. If you're working with an art director, I highly recommend that you do a more detailed drawing out of your imagination than I did. The hand is very rough. I'm just thinking about surface planes. There's really no facial features. I'm more so thinking about the surface planes, the light hitting her from the left. I'm trying to be very in sync with my structures. The front of her face would be in a light shadow. You have to think about the action of the pose. And for me personally, with this particular project on the website, drawingtutorialsonline.com, I did not want to get into spending hours trying to figure out what that hand looks like. But that's a good thing to do, actually, for you if you're working with an art director. And it's just really good practice. Understand, if this was for an actual job, the details would be in there. Not super detailed out like a final sketch, but I would play with the hand. I'd play with the expression a little bit more just so I don't make the art director nervous, because art directors can get very nervous if they don't know what's happening with your drawing. They also might think that you don't know what you're doing. If you've been working with a client for a long period of time, they'll trust you. But if it's a new client, I really suggest that you put more details in versus less. Looking over my notes, I like that her body is facing the left and her head is turned to the right. What I'm going to do when I photograph my daughter for this scene is play with different actions. I'll play with having her look to the left. I'll play with her having her holding her dress, different facial expressions. But I'll also play with the light, because when I look at this photo, the light pretty much is coming from the left. Now, do I want to have her whole face in shadow and just have the light on the left? I could deal with that because I can put a fill light in there and get rid of really dark shadows on the front of her face. But I'm going to experiment with the lighting. I'm going to put a side light on her, and then I'm going to experiment with having a rim light hitting the side of her body and then putting a fill light on the front. When you have all of this big open sky with all of this light grass, there's a lot of fill that's going to hit the model's shadow. Now, let me show you the next sketch.